Todd, I can see you even though you're kneeling down. So please stop talking, close the doors, and we'll get started with session 8 on the melody of creativity. So we are getting musical now in the afternoon. And the first paper will be the relationship between music, creativity, and what happens inside the brain. So an EEG, behavioral, performer, and assessor study of cognitive brain states during piano performance. This paper will be presented by Shama Raman. She has a PhD in neuroscience of musical creativity at Imperial College of London, now working with Goldsmith. And she is also a professional actor, appeared in 24-part BBC drama series, professional musician, a singer, a composer. She has all the elements to talk about the melody of creativity. Shama, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Whoa, wow, definitely not singing today. How are you all? I guess it's all like post-lunch slump. Welcome to come and join me a little bit further forward. I won't bite. So these are the institutions that I've been working with, Imperial College London. I'm actually about to hand in the PhD in 2 weeks, so any feedback would be much appreciated, so yeah. So I'd love to thank, obviously, Professor Kim Christensen, Henrik Jensen, and I also have advisors at the Royal College of Music in the form of Richard Dickens. Some of you would know Joydeep Bhattacharya from Goldsmiths, who's done quite a lot on creativity. And then I've had judges, equipment, participants. I'm going to be walking away with the piano at the end of this. From the Royal College of Music, Trinity College of Music, which is more jazz, Goldsmiths, Royal Academy of Music, and the Guildhall. And these are all music colleges in London. And specifically, would love to thank for their compositional input. In this case, I did not compose. Peter Wust from Aarhus and Matthew Lee Knowles, who's a composer from Guildhall. It's all funded by EPSRC. Some of you are familiar with neuroscience. If not, I was just going to try and convince you that it's a complex system. It's been estimated that the adult brain has around 100 billion neurons and an even larger number of glial cells. There are a number of different scales. So we start with the individual neurons. They become columnar loops. And then they become sort of areas, modular areas in the brain. So you get your frontal lobes, you get your parietal lobes, occipital lobe at the back. All of these kind of come together to make the whole brain. And the brain itself is only a little part of the central and peripheral nervous system. So that's what allows me to hold this microphone right here and take it away. So creativity, I believe you would have come across this picture earlier from the first day of the conference. You go back to that goddamn cubicle and start thinking outside the box. Recent developments in theories about creativity have told us that creativity is actually a syndrome or complex. I don't know, I'm obviously quoting you over here. And creative ideation allows the individual to remain flexible and facilitates adaptive behavior. Essentially, I'm asking, why is creativity a good thing and why am I studying it? Creativity, in this particular case, when we're looking at music, involves a full use of cognitive faculties, a state in which personality, consciousness, and knowledge have free access to each other. Being in the zone, which is what we're going to be talking about, is like having the cogs of the mind oiled. Being creative is quite possibly the most complex thing you can do. So, music. Structurally, in neuroscience, there's a hell of a lot of different areas in the brain that would probably be involved in playing a piece of music. You have your auditory cortex, assuming that you can hear. It'll obviously be listening to things as you're playing. The motor cortex, obviously the movement control of your fingers as you're playing. The orbital cortex, and this will come in a bit handy when I present some of my results, when you're actually like sight reading, especially when it comes to classical music. Areas that have been sort of like generally known in the anatomy world for frontal lobes is the control of decisions, working memory, personality even sometimes, mood, executive function, and a filtering. Temporal and parietal cortex, you have this sort of shuttling between memories, and the emotional and reward system. Obviously, we do this for a reason. And functionally as a language, music itself is very complex. You can have things in various keys. Tonalities is like major, minor, sad or happy is an easy way of putting it. Different tempos, something can be really fast, something can be really slow. Different rhythms if you're into waltz or if you're into drum and bass. Different motivic patterns, number of notes. I mean, it carries on. I would like for people to maybe join in here, but I don't know if we're going to have too much time. But how good are you guys at clapping? Yay! Yeah, no, not for me. I'm going to try and get... it's going to fall. That's nothing to do with it, so... 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't change. You do the 1, 2, 3, and I'll try and put the thing on top. It's going to be difficult otherwise. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I'm doing a 4, you're doing a 3. But the two put together is more than the sum of its parts. It's a completely new rhythm. So that's what I was trying to explain a little bit in terms of the complexity of music. So many areas are needed in this performance. So it's unlikely to be a case where things are self-contained. So there isn't necessarily like an area which is just music. There isn't like a music modal area, and more likely to be a case where the whole of the brain is integrated to complete an action. So we know we came across the ideas from Beth Hennessy about there being a systemic approach to creativity. I would say music in itself is a very systemic thing where the whole brain comes together. So why is it interesting to a complexity scientist? We'd like to investigate the macro level, the emergent patterns of a complex brain activity that give rise to a complex phenomena of musical creativity in real time. So, right now I'm going to be looking at two different types of creativity. One is called interpretation, and it's more familiar to those of you possibly who've listened to a lot of classical Western music. I'm just going to play you Mr. Glenn Gould, just to show you, ooh, if it actually comes back. To my favorite, which is improvisation, which is a lot more common in jazz and also Indian classical music. And I'm going to try and get you to guess the tune before it comes along. So with improvisation, you can change a lot of different things. You can change the number of notes, you can change the key, you can change the rhythm, quite a lot of things, and still get people to recognize what it is you've just done. So that's improvisation, another different type of creativity. So this is what my experiment's all about. I'm actually measuring people with EEG. I'm measuring their electrical brain activity when they're improvising or when they're interpreting. I give them 20 pieces of music, hopefully that are unfamiliar, so they wouldn't necessarily have had a chance to have, I don't know, all the time in the world to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and perfect it in different keys. So I'd like it to be unfamiliar. I don't necessarily want too much of a role of memory in what I'm hopefully going to find. And on that front, I want to be able to capture the insightful aha moment within creativity. So 10 of them come from the jazz sound world, and 10 of them come from a classical sound world. And both have notation that's recognizable by both jazz and classical musicians. You would recognize that jazz musicians often look at chords which are put on the top of the score that's at the bottom, for example. But equally, classical musicians might not understand what it means when you say swing. So then on this side it says swing, and on the other side it kind of spells it out as to what it actually means. So I divided both improvisation and interpretation into think and play stages. Again, because when it comes to EG, if you guys are familiar, there's a lot of things that are maybe not cognitive and more motoric or noise. Not really, but it's not what I'm interested in. And there are 4 instructions for each of the subjects. So they're asked to play the extract exactly as presented by the composer. So like the bare bones, don't change anything. And then this second bit is randomized. So it's either be interpret or improvise. So then 1 and 3 are bringing them back to the baseline of just playing it as it is. So afterwards, well, I'll obviously record all this music. I don't necessarily tell them they're going to be judged on it, because you can't judge creativity, surely. But afterwards, I send a marking form I've sent it to 5 judges, 3 of which come from a jazz sound world, and 2 of them which come from a classical sound world. And I present it like this, so they're able to sight read themselves, and I ask them to rate how creative they thought they were. And I don't give them very long at all, so this is meant to be based on a gut feeling. And it goes from 1 to 5, very uncreative, uncreative, ambivalent, creative, very creative. The same exact question is also asked the participants at the end of each creative performance that they do, either interpreting or improvising. And they are also presented, judge and participant alike are presented the same extracts in the same randomized manner. So hopefully a self-assessment of how creative did you think that was, plus how creative did you think that was regarding the participants, plus the EEG should give us something about creativity. So it's your turn. How hard is this to actually do? So it's probably better if you guys close your eyes and you don't necessarily know which one I'm about to play. But what I'm going to get you to do is rate each thing that I play from 1 to 5. Okay? So close your eyes.
Subject 8, extract 19, interpreting. Please rate creativity.
Okay, so how many people thought that was a 1? 1 is very uncreative. 1, okay. How many people thought that was 2? Okay, a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah. How many people thought that was meh, neither or, neutral, ambivalent, don't really care? 1 person, 2 people. How many people thought that was 4? That's good. Okay, there's a lot of people who don't have any opinions. How many people thought that was 5? Like, excellent. Okay.
6 is not.
Okay, get you to close your eyes again. This is exactly the same piece with a different person.
Subject 12, extract 8, interpreting. Please rate creativity.
Okay. Did you hear that? Yeah? How many people thought that was a 1? Okay. How many people thought that was a 2? Okay. How many people thought that was a 3? Okay. How many people thought that was 4? Oh. How many people thought that was a 5? Okay. So the judges agree with you. Close your eyes again.
Subject 8, extract 19, improvising. Please rate creativity.
Okay. 1. Okay. 2. 3. 4. 5. Okay. So you can see it's the same extract being interpreted and improvised on. So last one.
Subject 12, extract 8, improvising.
Cool. 1. Nobody. 2. 3. 4. 5. Yeah, I expected that. So I guess we've been talking a lot about assessment and all the different ways you can break it all down. And we thought, after speaking to a lot of musical advisors, what would be the best thing to do? And out of about 5 minutes of chatting, they went, both audience and instrumentalist or musician know. They just know within the first 2 or 3 seconds whether this is going to be a particularly inspired piece of playing. And so we thought, okay, why don't we just ask them, how creative did you think that was? And ask the same question to both of them. And just as you guys worked on your gut instinct, they did, and so did the judges. And what you guys did, we're not a million miles away from what the judges thought all put together. So these are some of my results. What we did find when we put it all together, that jazz judges tended to be a little bit harsher systemically than classical. Why that is, I mean, I could go into that. It's probably a bit more to do with the sort of musical anthropology of how difficult it is to sort of maybe really wow a judge who's from a jazz background. But the larger the circles are, the more instances there are of that particular score. So what I did is I looked at just the jazz extracts and then just the classical extracts and plotted the jazz versus the classical in terms of the judges' ratings for those particular extracts. And what you can see with the star on the two graphs on the right-hand side, you can basically see that both of them have a systemic bias for jazz judges, marking a bit more harshly. So what we actually did is we corrected for that by looking at the center of mass, and that was what you can then see. They're now on the same x equals y slope. Oh, right, okay, let's do this really quickly then. All the results, and you can't ask me anymore. So, this is the results in terms of the different subjects. So the first subject that I got you to listen to is the first one. What this is showing is the difference in opinion, the maximum value and the minimum value that judges give a particular subject. And there seems to be the most, not only the most disagreement about the first subject, but if you look up at the top where the red values are, those are the actual mean values given to the whole, all the extracts averaged across. And what we found was like there seems to be like a higher rating overall of a subject, the more agreement there is between the judges about that subject, which I'll look into in a bit more detail in a second. But these are when we look at the different sort of jazz extracts versus the classical extracts, but also in the two different conditions that I played you, interpret and improvise. And it seems a lot easier for people to actually judge a classical piece of music that's been interpreted. It's highly unsurprising because it's something that's done quite a lot more easily. A lot more often. I don't know if you can see that, but this is basically like a little bit of a exploration into this idea of the fact that the more disagreement there is between judges, the actual overall score that they give that particular subject goes down. So specifically, we looked at classical, I think, if I'm correct, classical improvisation, jazz improvisation, classical interpretation, and jazz interpretation. We also then looked at whether there's an agreement between the judges and the participants themselves. So this is what I've plotted over here. So we have the subjects on the y-axis and the judges on the x-axis, and it says the actual average of of all the extracts across classical and jazz, and they generally tend to show an agreement. However, if we look at that in a little bit, if we sort of draw it out a little bit more, the judges tend to be quite strict about the sort of range of ratings they give, whereas the participant themselves seems to be a little bit more sort of wide-ranging, and this could be something to do with their own sort of subjective confidence or subjective shyness about their own playing. So that comes in handy a little bit later. And then finally, if we did divide it into jazz versus classical, we saw that particular subjects were more from a jazz background and particular were more from a classical background. Obviously, we did interview them to begin with to find out which one, but we also wanted to see if this could be something that could be predicted from both their own assessments and the judges' assessments, which it could. It actually matched exactly. So if you're linking this with what we did is we tried to look at a source localization of the EEG that we recorded to see if any of these assessments would actually be shown up in the EEG brain activity. So first of all, we looked at jazz versus classical, and we looked at all the different combinations of improvisation versus improvisation, or improvisation versus interpretation, to see if there's any actual difference in the type of creativity. The first thing that we see is if we looked at the condition of improvisation versus interpretation, but only within classical background participants, we saw an activation in the left hemisphere of Brodmann area 37, which is something that is often related to semantic processing. For example, changing something that I've read into some sort of like mental representation. So in this case, they're all reading a score. So actually trying to have that sort of mental imagery. But then if you look at the second and the third rows, this is looking at comparing jazz versus classical. The first one is about interpretation, and the third one is about interpretation. And what it shows is that there's actually a deactivation, which seems to imply that it's only classical people that tend to have this extra activation when they're reading a score. In addition, if we looked at the deactivation patterns for both improvisation and interpretation between participants of jazz and classical background, there's a deactivation in Brodmann area 18. And this, again, is to do with the sort of translation of something visually represented as a score and then changing that into music. What's interesting is that we also see a temporal pattern within jazz musicians. What we did do is we segmented something, say an improvisation that might take, say, in between 30 seconds to even a minute. What we were interested in is to see if there's a difference in the first part of an improvisation, the middle part of an improvisation, and the end of an improvisation. And we did see like a segmentation. We took 4 seconds. Of each. We saw a difference. The first row depicts the first 4 seconds, and it shows a right hemispheric activation of Brodmann area 6, but a left hemispheric activation when we then move on to the middle 4 seconds. And that's the same when you look at Brodmann area 9, which is the second row, and then Brodmann area 46, which is the third row. So there is actually a temporal evolution in the activation for jazz musicians. And this is a really, really interesting area that seems to always show up with jazz musicians. When we're comparing improvisation and interpretation, we always see in the first and middle 4 seconds a deactivation of the precuneus on the right-hand side. Looking into a little bit of sort of background research into this area, it seems that there seems to be quite a marked deactivation in periods of anesthesia, hypnosis, sleep. So perhaps there's something going on between that sort of a mental state of consciousness and jazz musicians when they're improvising. This is my very last slide. And this is probably the bit that's most interesting. If we look at creative versus non-creative, what you see all the way on the right-hand side of the screen is when we looked at the top 78 extracts as judged by the judges, versus the bottom 78 extracts as judged by the judges. And what we see is quite a robust activation of Brodmann area 32 in the left hemisphere. This is an area that actually has a lot of different connections in the brain coming into it and coming out of it, including the reward systems that I talked to you about before, but also integrating like movement-related things in executive function. What's on this side is the top 78 as rated by the participants themselves, versus the bottom 78 as rated by the participants themselves. We wanted to see if there was some sort of marker that we'd be able to see in the EEG, or was it mainly just something subjective as a bias? Possibly a mixture, but what we do see is that sort of mixture of the Brodmann area 37, and this is something we saw when we just compared the classical areas of improvising and interpreting. We saw an activation in the first 4 seconds, a deactivation in the middle 4 seconds. But there's this pattern here, again, of a right hemispheric activation of Brodmann's areas 6, 9, and 45. But when you look at the judges, it's exactly the other side, the same areas. So yeah, all food for thought. Who's more right? We don't know, but there's a little bit of an overlap in terms of the extracts. And what we can say, there's a bit more of a robustness with Brodmann area 32 when it comes to the judges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We only have time for one question. Quick, please, Anton.
I think the relationship to music and creativity. Thank you. The relationship to music and creativity is particularly interesting because this is one of the few fields where you can actively identify that you will be having left brain activation and right brain activation, which is very difficult to really predict in any other form of creativity. As you probably know, the corpus callosum between the two halves tends in adults to be much better developed when you've learnt music as a young child. And I wonder if you had the opportunity in any of those studies to actually measure the corpus callosum of your subjects.
Well, the thing is, what this does, it's actually like a difference in activity of the electrical brain activity, which is measured on the scalp surface. So sometimes anything that's very, very like deep within within the brain, it's not that easily picked up. If there is a difference, which I guess would be around this sort of an area, that didn't show up as being particularly different between classical and jazz or improv versus interpret. Otherwise, we would have seen that coming up. But yeah, that's a really good point.
Okay, thank you very much again.
Any feedback's really, really helpful for me if you want to chat to me afterwards, because I'm going to be handing this in. So if this doesn't make sense, please do tell me. Thank you.
The next presentation is on how much for this original music, the role of creativity and personality on the music market value. It will be delivered by Jean-Louis Tavani. He is with University Paris-Descartes. He received his PhD in 2012 on social psychology, working on his postdoc position now with Professor Todd Lubart at LATI. And if you're ready, the floor is yours. Third? No? The third from the left. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I'm Jean-Louis Tavani. I'm not Julie Collange, as is right in the program. What is the common point of all this masterpiece? In that time, they have seemed to be original, new, and like this pig, maybe they shocked. The second is cute. I will talk about the determinant of the adoption of a novel product. And here we will focus on the determinant of adoption of novelty through the possible empirical illustration, new or unusual music, unusual for the participant. This project involves some economists and psychologists. That has been done in France, and I present the result of 2 empirical studies. The variables that may influence the adoption of novelty as was in three types. The first is social variable, individual variable, and the variable related to the product. Here, today, we'll focus on the individual variable, especially personality traits and creativity skills. Previous study shows that openness, consciousness, and extraversion influence satisfaction with music. And other studies show that creative potential, creative skill, influence the evaluation of a product. The goal of the first study is to explore the role of personality traits, openness, consciousness, and extraversion, and the role of divergent thinking, and the role of personal involvement to the music, and peer influence with an experimental manipulation. Participants listened to 6 pieces of music. These pieces were chosen by a pretest. In the pretest, the music was writing by from the preference by some people, lay people. The participant listened the 6 pieces, and after they evaluate each piece. Half of the song were presented with preference rating generated in the pretest, and the other half without the information. After each hearing, participants give some evaluation with novelty, familiarity, and satisfaction about the music. And they ask they give a price of each pieces. We conduct some hierarchical multiple regression with the price as a dependent variable, and the personality trait, the divergent thinking style, the familiarity with music, the satisfaction with music, and the novelty of the music, and the personal involvement as a predictor of the price. The results show when the music was presented without information, the satisfaction with music predict the price, and some personality trait, extraversion, consciousness, and the divergent thinking. When the music was presented with information, there is no effect of personality, just extraversion, and still the effect of satisfaction with the musical stimuli. Divergent thinking is not a good predictor of price, and that's maybe an explanation was creativity are more complex. And in the second study, we take in account the integrative thinking. The goal of the second study is to explore again the influence of personality traits and integrative thinking. To assess the integrative thinking, we use the epoch test developed by Todd Lubart and Maud Besançon. This test allows to provide separate evaluation of graphical and verbal integrative thinking style. Participant of the second study was a high school student, and they listened 20 pieces of music was unusual, and the music was presented without information or with information about the rating, and the rating was low, this music is not good, or high, this music is good. There is 3 conditions, experimental condition, and all the participants was randomly assigned to 1. We conduct multiple regression analysis with orthogonal contrast, and as we can see on the figure, the effect of the information, when the information is not good, when someone told this music is not good, the participant make a good evaluation. And when the music is presented like a good music, the participant make a negatively evaluation. There's no effect of personality traits here. And there is an effect of the integrative thinking. There is a negative relation with graphic integrative thinking and positive relation with verbal integrative thinking. The more individual is efficient in graphical integration, the less he will like that music, and the more the individual is efficient in graphical integration, the more he will enjoy the music. This result needs to be clarified because there is some particular result. The influence of the information and the influence of integrative thinking needs to be clarified. For the information, we have two explanations of this effect. The first is like Bourdieu has said, aesthetic judgment is a way to make a differentiation between out group, in group, and maybe here the information give to the participants was presented on the older student who has give this information, and maybe there is an interaction. And the other explanation is in terms of expectation effect. When someone tells you this music is good, we can be disappointed or surprised by the music after listening it. And we are currently investigating this two explanations with Guillaume first. And we need to clarify the effect of integrative thinking because there is a difference. The verbal is positively predict the satisfaction, and the graphic integrative thinking is negatively linked to the judgment. And maybe we need to use some musical integrative thinking evaluation or measurement. Thank you, and enjoy unusual music.
Thank you very much, Jean-Louis. Open the floor for questions. Any questions from the floor? Evaluation of music. Yeah.
Musical integrative thinking evaluation. How would you test this? I mean, well, any ideas?
Maybe we can give some pieces of music and ask the participant to make some commercial argument for a disc or a cover of a disc, or maybe tell a story about these pieces in manner of integrate these 3 or 4 pieces in one thing.
Okay, thank you again. Okay, next speaker is Mihailo Antovic. He's from the University of Niš in Serbia, associate professor there, head of the Cognitive Science Center. He's been a researcher with a Fulbright scholarship at the University of Freiburg in Germany, and he's interested in music and language cognition. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor. Turn on the...
Which one is it? Yeah. You hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. It's great to be here in Bologna. I would like to talk about the relationship between musical creativity, or more elements of music theory, perhaps a little bit music semiotics, and the conceptual blending theory, which is a prominent, I hope, because I support it, theory in the cognitive sciences. It started off as a cognitive linguistic theory in the late 1990s, early 2000, 2002, but slowly, gradually, it became a general theory of cognition, which is very, very interested in the notion of creativity, okay? So I talk about musical creativity in light of conceptual blending theory, more particularly on examples of metrical, melodic, and semiotic musical structure. I want to show, number one, how elements of a music theory conceptually emerge by blending or putting together distinct conceptual elements from music itself and the world of experience. So you get a blended construct. And then how these emergent results of previous blending operations are used as inputs for further conceptual interaction. And I would also like to speculate on some possible constraints on this creative, somewhat recursive blending process in music. Okay? But in order to give you the details, I first have to tell you a bit about the conceptual blending theory. So it's best if one starts with an example. Okay, so this is me discussing things with Kant. Okay, you can see that I'm pretty bewildered because Kant is definitely much brighter than I am. The theory started off as an explanation of strange linguistic expressions, counterfactuals, metaphorical expressions, deliberate puns used in newspaper commercials, and so on and so forth. So I've been debating this problem with Kant all night. Is a classical example of how the theory tries to approach counterfactuals. So one possible explanation of how our mind is able to understand, I hope you all do understand this sentence, would be something like this. Okay, so there might be two distinct conceptual packets involved, which the theorists call mental spaces, okay? So in one mental space, we would have me here in Bologna in the 21st century, hopefully still alive, talking or reading a book by Kant and struggling with a question of morality. And in the other mental space, you would have Kant in 18th century in Königsberg, Germany, back then Germany, okay, perhaps writing one of his critiques, right? And then when we put some of the elements of the two conceptual spaces together, now there are many rules as to what can be combined, what cannot be combined. I cannot go into all details now. But when we put them together, what emerges from the interaction is what they call a blended mental space, okay? Some sort of an image of me and Kant discussing a problem, whatever, related to morality or whatever. Okay, so this is how it all started, puns, metaphors, and so on and so forth. But after a while, it turned out that this kind of method could come in very handy for discussing all kinds of cognitive processes and all kinds of issues related to creativity. For example, this would be, where is it? Yeah, here it is. This would be a proverbial example, right? The Sphinx, so what is it? It has, one mental space would deal with human beings, right, with a person, and the other would have to do with the lion, and then you put these two together and get a new mythological creature. So mythology, religion, they're packed with examples like this one. Very importantly, new elements emerge in the blend. So you have something novel, something which was not there in the inputs, and it comes from the interaction itself. You have this in the sciences, for example, social sciences. Now, the tip of the iceberg metaphor that you have with Freud, right? So consciousness is the tip of the iceberg. You have the tip of the iceberg, or the iceberg, and you have the human mind. You put them together, and now something emerges, like the idea that we could have more superficial and more deep layers in our consciousness, okay? I will not try to explain what space-time is because I have no idea. I'm a social science guy. But they tell me, physicists tell me that space-time, for example, could be considered a typical blending construct, okay? So this has been applied to numerous aspects of cognition, okay? In music, some folks have done this before me, probably much better than I do, okay? But conceptual blending theory may be applied to some tenets of music theory. So let's see how it works in terms of structure. I'm particularly interested in melody and rhythm, here, pitch hierarchies and rhythm. And in terms of semiotics, something what some people call the meaning of music. So remember, we want three phenomena. First, simpler blends that in turn serve as inputs to more complex blends, which results in new creative emergent properties of the system. So we start with the simplest thing in any music theory, which is two pitches. Okay? My throat is in a terrible condition, but you can imagine that I sing two tones of different heights. Forgive my use of the term heights, because that's not what we actually have when you hear the tones, okay? Ba, ba, that was terrible, but okay, you get the idea. Okay, so what are these two like? And of course you will say, well, they're low and high, right? Of course they're low and high. Is it really of course that they're low and high? Is there anything in the music itself, in the thing that I'm producing, that actually makes them low and high? No, it's a matter of our conceptualization. So the two tones are produced in my mouth. They might be heard in the speakers, hopefully. They're actually interpreted by our minds, but they are not inherently low and high. By the way, this is culturally Latin. Other cultures can use different conceptualizations. So in order to interpret even this basic construct, even this basic construct of music theory, what we need to do is have a referential space. That is to say, something from the extra musical world, let's say small and big persons or low and high objects or entities, and then we put together these two things in order to get the full-fledged musical construct, okay? Now, more technically, an analysis would be something like this. So we have tones with their frequencies, in whatever way interpreted or perceived as different by our minds, and there are, again, theories and theories about this, how this happens. We have low and high objects, and then we have two elements which we put together according to some connections, and we end up with a metaphor that pitches our heights. This is a metaphor. This is not really something inherent to the music. So here we have emergence. Now there is a distance between the two tones which we didn't have in the inputs. So the distance between these two tones is an emergent structure. This is already creative in some sense, in some very basic sense. And then we can use this emergent structure in order to create more complex structures, such as the idea of musical scales. Again, I'm singing terribly, okay? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. The worst major scale that you ever heard, okay? So, yeah, so we have 8 separate distances here, right? Now, in different cultures, this is again conceptualized differently. Of course, in English, we would say that this is a scale. In my language, which is Serbian, Serbo-Croatian, we would say the ladder. But I guess you get the idea that these two images are pretty similar, right? So we relate this to something from the extra-linguistic reality, and then again, lo and behold, we get the musical construct, okay? Again, more schematically, we have something like this. This would be a conceptual blending analysis, and you get a metaphor. The pitch sequencing is vertical movement. Watch movement. Now the distances are made more discrete, and the path topology emerges from the blend, resulting in our sense that the music is moving. Music is not moving anywhere. Okay? Again, it's produced in the resonator, interpreted in the mind, but we keep talking about musical movements, motion, and so on and so forth. Okay? So something like this. Now it is moving. And then it goes on and on. So this is the basic example related to melodical structure. And now some more clapping, something related to rhythm. Rhythm can be interpreted in a myriad of ways, and there are, again, hundreds of theories of rhythm. The way to approach rhythm, a possible way to approach it by means of the conceptual blending theory would be this. Okay, so you have isochronous beats. Bop, 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 until we all die. I can go on doing this, right? But we also have something else. We have perceptual salience, which can be created in a myriad of ways. One of the beats can be louder, pop, 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 longer, pop, 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 differently articulated, dum, 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 higher, pop, 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 whatever, okay? So when we combine these two things together, what we get is, do I have it? The sense of metrical structure. What emerges from this is cyclicity, or cyclicity, whatever you say, right? So we have an idea that this is cyclic, a cycle that repeats. It's not the same. Even when I try to sing it the same way, like it's never totally the same. Not to mention when you have the harmony and the melody and the lead voices and the guitars and whatever, and you're still able to infer it, okay? So it's a blended construct. Now, this blended construct goes on to create more complex blended constructs, like doublets and triplets put together, create something that's very popular in my part of the world, which is the Balkans. That's the complex meter, something like this. And look at my shoulders. Now, people from my part of the world would respond to this immediately by jumping or wanting to dance or something. So perhaps this urge to dance is an emergent psychological property of the further complexity of the rhythmical structure. And you can go on, okay? 2 variants of irregular pulse, you put them together. Of course, you get more of a formal complexity of the meter, but you also get even more of an urge dance. Listen to this one. This is a traditional song from the south of Serbia. One, two, three, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, and now the other. And so on and so forth. Now, whoever can repeat this, that would be very nice. Especially people from the Western world, usually they say that they would have a bit of a problem with this because they don't have this in their musical intuitions. I'm not sure, okay? There are even more complex examples. Okay, and now comes blending in semiotics. So I give you 3 examples: melody, rhythm, and semiotics, musical meaning. Programmatic music, opera, film music. We put together music with something that is not musical, that's referential, okay? This is my favorite character. You can imagine Darth Vader. Okay, and Darth Vader is usually associated with, you know, Star Wars. Probably most people here do. All people. Here's the theme, you know the theme. Imperial March by John Williams. You'll hear it. Because I don't want to prompt you into interpreting. Yeah, okay, so you know, so you put the theme together with some extra musical context, and some psychologists would say that this is just behavioral association. I'm not sure. I think that there are elements that emerge from this process. At least that Vader is more frightening after you hear the music. At least that. But the thing is, what happens when the theme takes off? Again, this blend becomes an input to further blends. Look at this. Just visual examples for starters. The Vader cartoon. Vader cat. Vader cookies. Vader ladies. And Vader politicians, okay? Now, these are all conceptual blends, and you're laughing. I'm glad that you are, because that's the whole point. We create a new, emergent, novel, creative effect. Right. Now, we can do the same thing with the music. So if we retain the music and change the context, or if we retain the context and change the music, you get all kinds of effects. Ideological messages of different kinds, or irony of different kinds. So here's Hitler. Is Hitler moving? No, he's not. Hitler, move. Okay, he's moving. Okay, maybe a little bit. So I play the theme to Hitler moving. Something has changed, right? Okay? And this has been used and abused and abused and abused in a million contexts. I come from Serbia, which was unfortunately bombed in 1999. Never again. The national television played a propaganda video against NATO. You know, NATO planes, and you have this music, right? Okay. But you can also do the other thing. Forget about Hitler now. You can change the music and retain Vader. Now, my students, when they hear this is culturally Latin, the class is over when they hear this. So this is the effect that I wanted to have. It's played on the accordion, which is kind of very typical of the part of the world that I come from. Yeah. Okay, you got it. You got it. So actually the analysis would look something like this. It's very complicated, but what you have here is the Darth Vader musical space with all its elements. And here you would have something like the Balkan traditional music space. And then some of the elements that map onto one another do not match, okay? So you get a discrepancy here, which results in the disruption of your expectancies. And what emerges from the system is that you laugh, or that you sense that there is an irony involved, or something that really doesn't work, okay? A possible visual equivalent would be this. The Darth Vader housewife, right? So we have the Darth Vader space and the housewife space, and then we put them together. And we get something which is funny, maybe not high culture, but it's creative in a sense, I guess. Okay. Now, to take home, elements of a music theory may emerge, such as distance, such as musical motion, such as the urge to dance, such as ideological use or abuse in musical semiotics, such as irony or satire, probably many more. So emergence is an important phenomenon in the cognitive sciences of music, but it has its limits. It's grounded in various levels, which can be biological, cognitive, cultural, linguistic, individual, and so on and so forth. So we should think, when we talk about emergence, as being very important for creativity. Formal elements put together, they give us something new out of the blue, in and of themselves. That's okay, that's fine. But we should always also think about the constraints on this process. So here, you probably won't hear this because it's too silent. This is an Arabic scale. Do we have somebody from the Middle East? You cannot hear this, yeah. For me, this is a problem. So it's smaller than quarter tones, the distances. I'm not sure I will be able to repeat this one, okay? So there are some discrimination limitations related to my culture or related to my whatever, physiological system, so that there is a problem with interpreting this scale. Or, who can clap to this one? This is Karl Orff, by the way. Carmina Burana. So he's Western. Ooh, who can repeat this one? Okay. So you have limitations which are psychological, such as short-term memory limitations, which prevent some blends from working. And of course, you have limitations on variation in the music. Let's get back to Darth Vader for one last time. So if you don't know anything about Star Wars, I mean, you wouldn't get the blend. You wouldn't get the interpretation in the first place. But even if you did know something about Star Wars and bent this theme musically to the point of unrecognizability, you might get something like this. This is the last one. This is called the Darth Vader Lament. Can you even recognize it, right? So, again, we have limitations. Okay. It's actually cute. I love it. But I'm not sure John Williams would agree. Now here it's summer. Here it is. Okay, right. So can we ground blending somehow? So these networks with circles would be things that emerge, and these squares or rectangles would be genetic, embodied, perceptual, socio-cultural, and so on. Grounds, as Larry Barstow calls them, or perhaps anchors. Somebody mentioned Ed Hutchins. So somewhere between emergence and constraints is where we should look, I think, for musical creativity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for a very lively presentation. Any questions from the floor or comments? Yes, please. Adva?
I would like to ask how you use these marvelous ideas in order to enhance creativity in children's education or teachers' education.
Well,
how do you get this
further? I haven't talked much about it. This is actually more of a theory that explains the roots of creativity than a theory that would be applied to practical issues related to creativity. But I think you can. I mean, for example, one idea, the Darth Vader theme, which doesn't have to be, but the example that's related to Darth Vader, musical and the extra musical. So you get something like, psychologists know what these are, Heider-Ensemble animations. When you have something like a square chasing something like a triangle, where you need to, actually there is no meaning, no interpretation, you need to project yourself into the story, right? Now, you can give them to kids and ask them to project themselves into the story to tell you what's going on. And then you play different kinds of music to this, to another group, and you get totally different interpretations. First, this is important for purely experimental reasons because it proves that there is something involved with the mixing of the music and the extra musical, but it can be also used in a classroom setting, I guess, for example.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering about, so yeah, it's really interesting to basically breaking down the different aspects of musicality in terms of what could actually constitute as being creative.
You got the microphone.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering what you're with.
Yeah.
Yes, you already know the answer. I guess, so how exactly were you proposing looking at this from an experimental point of view? I think conceptually it makes sense.
Difficult. It's very difficult because, you know, this is more of a metaphorical model. I mean, it is, okay, this is what we can do. So this is something, my group has done some things related to this. So one is the one that I've just mentioned. A master's students of mine did a study related to these strange animations and the music that she composed herself, which was, it was important to exclude anything that might have been in participants' short-term or long-term memory. And she got the results where the interpretation changed significantly with the music added. So that's one possibility. The possibility with the rhythmical structure, with the complexization of rhythm, okay? Yeah. We've tried just a pilot so far, so there are two possibilities. One would be Likert scales like yours, from 1 to 7. Tell us which one of these makes you dance more. And the other is the secret one that you actually record them. And you actually record their feet, and they start tapping to the rhythm becoming more complex. So there are ways to do this. And on the pitches and the tones, I've done a lot of that, and I can give you some papers.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is from the University of Bologna, a colleague of mine, Chiara Sintoni. She will be speaking about music listening, composition and performance, an experience of creativity for education. Okay, microphone and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody. So in my presentation, I intend to discuss some aspects of the research and teaching workshop for listening composition piano performance, which was planned for a group of 6 pupils from 10 to 12 years, all at the beginning stage in both listening and piano training. We can go on. Okay. I organized the teaching activity, planned the modules, and collected the data. The workshop was carried out by means of a 3-part learning activity, which combines listening, creative use of musical language, performance, and use of gesturing related to it. The goals of the project were the following: to favor the acquisition of listening competencies and capabilities that reinforce and enrich learning, to promote the potentialities of verbal language in order to describe music, analyze it, and understand its meaning, to favor the acquisition of basic competencies in the creative use of musical elements and in composition, starting from the concept of variation, to contribute to the acquisition of specific competencies in writing music, and to contribute to the construction and acquisition of gesturing abilities and musical taste in piano performance. The workshop started with a listening activity on a famous piano variation set by Mozart, that is 12 variations on À vous diriger maman, most likely written in Vienna in 1781 for one of Mozart's pupils, and considered both a masterpiece of the art of variation and a series of exercises for mastering the basic elements of pianistic technique and performance. I chose to start a discussion with the young students aiming to identify, analyze, and comprehend the main features of variation form which could be interesting and useful for the purpose of education. So variation is a form based on repetition that is one of the most important principles in musical language, in all the typologies of music. Variation is a form based on a theme, a subject, that is on a well-shaped musical idea that can be manipulated in many different ways according to the compositional rules developed in the 18th century in the Western music art tradition, in art Western music. In the second part of the 18th century music, variation is treated both as a technique and as a musical form. In the Western music tradition, and according to some important composers such as Johannes Brahms, but many others, variation is considered the first step in compositional training because it offers new ways of manipulating and reclothing the subject. The first step of the workshop was a listening activity based on the listening methodology of Giuseppina Laface Bianconi, which is the director of the Department of the Arts in Bologna, and a professor of music pedagogy in the same department. So the cognitive activity aimed at bringing students to comprehend the structure of the variation set and the compositional rules which have aroused the musical structures in Mozart's variation set. I created learning conditions so that students could understand the formal and syntactical unity of the variations and the musical relationships between them and the main subject which they come from, in order to give to students the means to make music, that is to realize and perform a set of variations of their own composition, starting from the variation of the theme used by Mozart, a French air which was very popular at Mozart's time. You know, Americans know it very, very well. Twinkle, twinkle, little stars, okay? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, and so on. And two Germans also, Morgen kommt der Weihnachtsmann, okay, the same. So, the second step was to discuss with the students the structural components of the popular French air, in order to underline and identify the main musical features which make the air particularly suitable for a variation treatment, that are, for example, shortness, simplicity, well-shaped musical phrases, well-shaped musical structure. The third step of the learning activity involved the students in creating a 7 variation set of their own composition, starting from the elaboration of the subject. The students defined the strategies useful to realize original and coherent variations. The pedagogical value of the activity lies on the ability both of maintaining and respecting the original scheme of the subject and manipulating it in a creative way, according to the concept of creativity underlined by the pedagogists Franco Frabboni and Franca Pinto Minerva as the human ability to combine harmoniously rational and fantastic thought. So creativity is a cognitive exercise. We chose to consider a fourth type of variation form, according to standard classification, based on melodic outline and on a constant harmonic plan. This type of variation allows melodic, rhythmic, dynamic, and movement modification of the subject. For this reason, it could be considered the simplest form of thematic development, in my opinion, particularly suitable for beginners. So each student realized one variation, except in the case of Alice, who composed the 2 variations strictly related with each other, and has unique musical features as far as melodic profile, movement, and mood are concerned. The students chose to maintain the rhythmic scheme of the left hand in order to concentrate their creative efforts on the right hand only. The activity was also an important exercise for students in writing their own music correctly. On the whole, the variation set composed by the young students is a kind of work in progress from a basic level of thematic development, variation number 1 and 2, to a deeper one, variations number 6 and 7. So we can have a video. Yeah. So we start with a theme, so the French air. That is a short composition in 2 parts. The opening part A, is an opening phrase, and then we have a middle section, B, which is, we call technically a progression, that is a repetition, a repetition of the same melodic and rhythmic scheme on various degrees of the scale. Yes, okay. A moment. And then the repetition of the opening phrase. So A, B in the score, but A, B, A, okay. I performed the theme and I explained to the floor the structural form of this little theme. So we can. Una parte A. Okay. B, progression. Degrees of the scale. A again. Okay. Then we have variations 1 and 2, composed and performed by Alice. As I said before, Alice composed 2 variations strictly related with each other. She chose to modify the rhythmic pattern of the melody without altering the air's original succession of pitches. So her first variation is based on little notes followed by silence. The second variation is a sort of extension, we may say, on the first one, and it is based on little notes in octaves. So, as far as gesturing is concerned, Alice played the short notes softly, staccato, and in variation 2, the octave passages forced the hand to choose its position quickly on the keyboard. So Alice's gesturing was regular and fluid as far as possible. Students were very, very excited, very worried. They performed the variation set for the first time, so they were very, very worried. Okay. Yeah. This one? Ah, no, ok. Una parte A. Ecco, ok. So this is second variation. Okay. Okay. Octave passages. Okay. Then variation 3 by Julia. Julia was the youngest student in the group. She was 10. Okay. Julia respected the rhythmic profile of the original subject in both the hands. She created a sort of geometric pattern made by short musical elements, and she chose not to respect the progression of the B part of the middle section, which sounds different from the original theme under a melodic point of view. The composition is not completely successful as far as the harmonic plan and the melodic variation are concerned, according to Western and art music composition process. So I discussed a lot of time with Julia about it, but she was very, very hard, very strong. She was a little stronger girl. A. She wrote her whole music. B. Progression. A. Thank you. Of course. Variation 4 by Francesca. You can see a tall girl, but she was 12 years old, no, not more. The middle section is particularly interesting in Francesca variation. Francesca chose to underline the progression of the original theme in the part B, in the central part, through a downward singing movement. Her variation is very singing, very sweet, very singing. And she writes on a score piano crescendo, that is softly and increasing the dynamic step by step. So. A. B. Progression. A. Thank you. Then variation number 5 by Valerio. Valerio had a big hand, so that's the reason why A very beautiful big hand. That's the reason why he chose to realize his own variation in arpeggios that are the notes of the chords one by one, okay? And so stretching the hand and fingers. As Francesca, he underlined the progression in the middle section through a downward round movement. Listen to Valerio's variation. B. In the middle of the piano. Variation number 6 by Valeria. I performed Valeria's variation because she was ill, so she couldn't perform. Valeria's own composition is much more elaborated than the previous ones. She chose not to respect the progression in the middle section, which sounds like a further development of the first part. So the harmonic plan is not strictly respected under a melodic point of view. So the melodic profile sounds perhaps too much erratic, but very, very fascinating. B. Now the last one, Lucia's variation, the last one. Lucia's variation is perhaps the most elaborated among the whole variations set, composed by the students, and the most successful too under all point of view, musical point of view. The first part is a sort of erratic arabesque. The middle section, the progression, is a variation of the progression of the original subject made by short scales. So Lucia's variation has a soft, dreaming mood, and her touch is very quiet. But she was very, very worried, so she's not. Her variation was very difficult to play for her. Okay. Progression. On the treble? Okay, thank you. So, yeah, Lucia wrote a very, very difficult variation. So, for her, it was very, very difficult to play. She was a beginner. Okay. So, to conclude, the described teaching activity has demonstrated to me and to my young students that it is possible to create a circularity between musical listening, composition, and performance, and to share the same experience by means of creativity. But also that it is important to establish a relation with our cultural tradition by means of creativity in order to understand and to love music, and to use cultural resources to generate new cultural resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Questions for you on the floor? Okay, it was too wonderful to ask any questions.
Wow.
But I will perform an exercise in conceptual blending now, inspired by Mihailo. Since now you started to talk about education, and the next session is education for the gifted, why don't we go straight, jump through the coffee break, because we can finish by around 4:15, and then we have more time before the gala dinner. So I would go on straight now. I thank you, Chiara, and I would call now Natalia Chumakova to start session number 9 on divergent creativity in 10-year students. Natalia is a professor and doctor of psychology, working for the RAE Psychology Institute in Moscow.
How can I list the slide? Okay.
Okay, Natalia, you're ready. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you. It's known that creativity is the most general characteristics of the all gifted people, and it's known also that environment, including school education, is very important for creativity development. We talked about it many times at the conference. So for this reason, there is a great demand for instruments to detect creative potential of children and to monitor its development. Recent studies indicate that creativity is partly domain general, but mainly domain specific. And it's probably better to measure creativity in each domain of activity. However, the modern Russian practice of the creativity assessment of elementary school children, the figural forms of tests are used predominantly. For example, the most popular test is Torrance test creative thinking figural form. Creativity in verbal domain is evaluated only at secondary school. In many respects, this is caused by the absence of the verbal test of creativity for the children from 6 to 10 years old, which could make it possible rapidly and reliably assess the creative potential of child in this domain. So, first aim of our First, our aim was to work out new instruments for creativity assessment in verbal and figural domain of activity. Moreover, we would like to examine the relations between creativity and intelligence by using the new instrument. Does the relationship between creativity and intelligence depend on the domain specific or not? So, we put forward the following hypothesis. The relationship between creativity and intelligence in elementary school children may depend on the domain specific. The total of 202 elementary school students participated in the research. They were divided into two groups. The first group A was divided into two subgroups. The first, students with creative giftedness. They have creative achievement in intellectual sphere, in art, in music and literature. The second subgroups, they're peers of the same age. The second group D was divided into three subgroups. The first, students with verbal intellectual profile. The second, students with non-verbal intellectual profile. And third, students with equivalent verbal and non-verbal intellectual profile. Russian version of Munich cognitive ability test for the gifted was used for defining cognitive profile and measuring IQ. A special instrument for creativity assessment in verbal and figural domain of activity has been developed. We used two divergent thinking tasks. One was verbal and the other was figural. The first task was on guessing. The children were showed the ambiguous figure and asked to make up as many different hypotheses of what it might be as they could. The figure you can see in the left-hand parts this figure you can see in the left-hand parts of the slide. After the first task, the children were asked to draw as many pictures as they could using these very figures. The child was provided with 5 sheets of paper. On each, 6 of the same ambiguous figures were presented. You can see them to the right. The time for drawing was unlimited. In the end, when the child did not have any more ideas, the child was asked to name each picture. The samples answers you can see in the slide. Different indices of creativity were calculated for these divergent thinking tasks. Fluency, number of ideas, originality, statistical rarity, elaboration, and one else, visual transformation. It was only for figural part. It means number of turnings of the basic figure during the creating drawings, creating picture. All the data were subjected to descriptive statistics. To see if the mean differences were statistically significant or not, independent sample t-test was run. The means of creative scores for gifted and control group presented in table 1. Independent sample t-test indicated significant differences in different indices of verbal creativity and task guesses between 2 groups. Yellow color shows significant differences. As we can see in the table 1, the children in gifted group showed higher general creative performance in verbal domain than children in control group. In this slide, you can see some answers given by the children from different groups. Also, t-test indicated significant differences on visual transformation score and elaboration score in task drawing between the 2 groups. Children from gifted group showed higher visual transformation score but low elaboration score, number of details in the picture, than children in control group. There were no significant differences between the groups in fluency and originality in task drawings. In this picture, you can see some of the children drawings. Finally, when analyzed in SPSS, the correlation between fluency, originality, elaboration, and visual transformation score and verbal and non-verbal intelligence score in the second group D. This table demonstrates low significant correlation between low but significant correlation between creative performance in verbal domain and verbal intelligence. The correlation between verbal elaboration score and verbal intelligence score was the highest, while the correlation between creative performance in figural domain and nonverbal intelligence score was not statistically significant. Students with verbal intelligence profile showed generally higher creative performance in verbal domain than students with nonverbal intellectual profile. There weren't any significant differences between students with equivalent verbal and nonverbal intellectual profile and students with verbal intellectual profile. So the results of the study show that elementary school students with different level of creative potential demonstrated different scores in assessment creativity by new instrument. It confirms the discriminative validity of the new instrument. The scoring of verbal fluency, originality, elaboration, and visual transformation appeared to be much higher in gifted group than in control group. The study reveals the relationship between the creative performance in the verbal domain and verbal intelligence in elementary school students. The students with verbal intelligence profile showed the best result in verbal domain of activity if compared with students with non-verbal intellectual profile. It means that it's very important, even necessary, to use the verbal forms for assessment creativity of elementary school children. The presented results indicate the complex and ambiguous connection between creativity and intelligence in 10 age children. The relationships between creativity and intelligence depends on the domain specific. The instrument used in the study is experimental and still under consideration. Therefore, the results should be treated as tendencies that show further directions of studies and analysis. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Questions from you? Please, Eugene.
Application of this inventory. I mean, can it be applied to adults or adolescents?
I see. Thank you very much for the questions. We tried to use it for adolescents, and we have some results. Very interesting. Yes, for adolescent children, it's possible to use. Yes.
Okay, I have a question for you because I'm always worried about the control group, children which are considered not to be creative or not to be gifted, actually. So I'm wondering if associated to this, there could be some form of training to the children and do the test afterwards and see, do you plan to do anything like that?
The control group was just peers from different class, from different schools. It may be they were maybe gifted child, of course, but we don't know anything because for gifted group we selected specially. Yeah.
Okay, then thank you very much again. Next speaker is Elena Shlebanova. She is a PhD and a professor at the Psychological Institute in Moscow, head of the Laboratory of Psychology for the Gifted Children, and she will dwell on the effect of intelligence on creativity for gifted secondary students. Okay, so Elena.
Good afternoon. Definition of creativity are widely different in various concepts and studies. Many of them are focused on the relation between intelligence and creativity. Creativity is understood as a highest level of intelligence, as the important component of intelligence, as a complex system involving intelligence, components, etc. Most authors recognize the complexity of creativity and plurality of simultaneous influences on this, on its manifestation and development in various domains. The issue of the relationship between intellectual and creative ability in gifted children is of particular interest. Also, many empirical studies are available. These rarely provide a systematic comparison this issue in the gifted student at different ages. Our study aimed to investigate the influence of intelligence on the teachers and test estimation of creativity in the gifted secondary students. A total of 480 students of 5 till 11 graders participated in this study. All of them attended secondary school for above average students in Moscow, a gymnasium, and so on. These schools applied different identification procedure for admission of children to 5th grade. So their cognitive ability and academic achievement corresponded to the top 30% of age peers. We used the following methods. The KFT cognitive ability tests for gifted students. This test is from the Munich ability test battery. It was adapted to Russian sample in the cooperative study. The second method is the teacher's checklist for rating of intellectual and creative giftedness. And the third method was the verbal tests of creative thinking, unusual uses with word newspaper and wooden ruler. The summary fluency, flexibility, and originality were computed. The results of correlation demonstrate only weak coefficients between intelligence and creativity in all grades. According to the total intelligence score, the 5 groups were formed in each grade. The groups were equal on size and significantly differed on the total intelligence scores. The 5 levels of intelligence represented 5 independent variables, named below first, the above, the average levels for this type of school. Moderate, high level, and exceptional level. The 4 grades also represented 4 independent variables. The dependent variables were the teacher's ratings and test scores of fluency, flexibility, and originality. The 5 versus 4 between subject multiple analysis of variance were performed. The results demonstrated significant influence of intelligence on the teacher's ratings of creativity, but no significant contributions were made by grade and the interaction of these 2 factors, intelligence and grade. As a whole, on all grades, the teacher's rating of creativity in the group 1 were significantly lower than the group 3, 4, 5, all levels of giftedness. And in group 2, above the average intelligence, were significantly lower than in the group 5, exceptional giftedness. However, for each separate grade, such differences were noted only in 7, 9, and 11 grades, but not in the 5 grades. Age differences in teacher ratings were not significant. At the same time, the test scores of verbal creativity were influenced by not only intelligence, but also the grade. But influence of interaction of these factors was not observed. As a whole, on all grades, the fluency, flexibility, and originality in group 1, below the average intelligence, were significantly lower than in 3 groups of the gifted. The results of each separate grade showed the effect of intelligence on the test scores of creative thinking, was significantly only in the 5th grade. Only in this grade a so-called threshold effect was observed. According to Torrance threshold hypothesis, a positive correlation between creativity and intelligence is observed when IQ is below 125. Great influence as the whole sample was shown that the test scores in the 5th grade were lower than in the elder grades, especially in originality. According to the results of effect of intelligence was significant as on the teacher rating of creativity as on the test creativity scores, whereas the effect of grade level was significant only on the test creativity scores. The effect of intelligence was reflected in the lowest creativity both on teachers' rating and on the test scores in students with intelligence below the average. However, in the grade, these differences of teacher rating between groups were not found, while the differences on the test scores were the highest compared with elder grades. The influence of grade level on the creativity test scores was ambitious. The lowest scores were noted in 5th graders, while the highest of fluency and originality were in 9th and flexibility in 7th grades. The data allowed to suppose that the debatability of interrelation of intelligence and creativity is caused by its age variability, discrepancy of results of different measurements of creativity, objective or subjective rating or test scores. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Elena. Questions from the floor? I have a question for you, which relates not to your study, which I understand, but to the fact that to be considered to be intelligent by teachers, normally for a student means that you know how to play the game well. You know what kind of answers to give to the questions, which is the right answer that the professor expects. And to be creative is very different. It means that you are able to give a range of different answers to a single question. So I'm concerned about the fact that if you want to be intelligent, you want to be a star, you get used to getting immediate recognition by the teachers, and the creative part slowly in years gets a little bit decaying. What do you think about this? Is this true? Is there a dichotomy between being intelligent and being creative?
Yes, the teacher, for teacher, the value of intelligence is more than creativity. And during school education, creativity of children decreased. Yes.
So you see the same danger. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Now, last and certainly not least, Elena Belova will close the conference, so I would start with an applause. Because it's not easy to be the last, but have you ever seen a conference where at the last presentation, last day, you have 30 people in the room? This is great. So thank you for being here. Elena will talk about creative and intellectual development of preschool gifted children with speech difficulties. She's a senior researcher at the Laboratory of Giftedness Psychology inside the Psychological Institute of the Russian Academy of Education in Moscow, and she has a PhD, of course. Elena, please close the conference.
afternoon, everybody, and let me start. The theme of my presentation is creative and intellectual development of preschool gifted children with speech difficulties. Some words about why do we consider this problem to be important. The first, foundation for future achievements and discoveries is laid in the children's creativity. It's necessary to create conditions for the full development of creative potential, talents of each child. The second, preschool childhood is a special period which gives great opportunities for disclosure of gifts. And many science write about specialty in the development of modern children, about increasing difficulties in the development of speech, communicating, and interactions. And some words about giftedness in the preschool years. The main characteristic of the giftedness is creative potential. This is manifested in the following: high cognitive need, high cognitive activity, initiative, persistence, and creative search, is creating new images and ideas, great desire for creative self-expression, creative use of objects. Specificity of the preschool period in discovering talents. There are some important aspects. Expressed cognitive activity from the elementary reaction to novelty at the first year to formulate questions, problems at 5 to 6 years. Emotionality, special openness to new experience, connection with the game, the volatility of interests and manifestation of the gifts, and subjectivity of novelty children's discoveries. Some gifted children have development problems, and there are some characteristics of gifted children with problems. From one side, we can see positive sides and strong characteristics. For example, advanced creative and abstract thinking, successfulness in problem and task solving, intellectual curiosity. And from the other side, negative abilities and difficulties. For example, speech difficulties, special orientation difficulties, insufficient attention concentration, and sometimes negligence in performing tasks and others. Speech development. Precisely on the stage of preschool age takes place intensive development of speech, its forms and functions. Any speech disorder of any degree may influence of child personality and behavior, and also on his abilities and giftedness manifestation. The peculiarities of giftedness development of preschoolers with speech difficulties remain not thoroughly investigated for the current moment. And so we make study of preschool gifted children with speech difficulties. The main aim was, thank you very much. The main aim was to reveal creative and intellectual development features of gifted preschoolers with speech difficulties. Tasks of study were: the first, identify gifted preschoolers; second, research into difficulties and limitations of speech development of gifted preschoolers; and third, analysis of the peculiarities of speech, intellectual, creative development of gifted children with speech difficulties in comparison with peers. Theoretical basis for research includes fundamentals of preschool children's development psychology, works of Vygotsky, Zaporozhets, and other scientists, conception of creative giftedness, by Alexei Matyushkin, according to which giftedness is scrutinized as creative potential, and Structure Dynamical Model of Giftedness by Elena Shiblanova.
So that's how to pronounce it.
Yes.
I should have heard that before.
About methods. Participants were 220 children of 5 to 6 years old. They were observed and investigated. And about measures, we used the Torrance test of creative thinking for the children of age 5 to 6 years, figure form A. Then method of express diagnostics of intellectual abilities by Shiblanova, Averina, Zadorina. Raven progressive matrices, method of speech development level research, observation of children behavior, conversation with children, tutors and teachers, parents, and analysis of children creative products. The criteria for gifted children selection was high score of Torrance test, and also we took into consideration observation data, conversation with parents and tutors, analysis of child creative products. We study gifted children with speech difficulties, and it was very important to determine these difficulties. Speech difficulties were determined in the result of the analysis of development. Coherent speech, a paraphrase on the text, vocabulary, the grammatical structure, sound structure, communication skills. Experimental study consisted of 2 parts. At first part, there was determination of the level of creative thinking, and we identified gifted preschoolers. At the second part, we identified the level of speech development, speech difficulties, cognitive activity, level of intellectual development. We received a lot of results, and one part of them I will demonstrate. 3 groups of children were distinguished at first part of study. The first group, preschoolers with high creative potential, gifted children. Second group, creative potential above the average level. And third group, creative potential of the average level, lower than average and low. Groups were equal in number of children, 13, as well as boys and girls. In each group, children with speech difficulties were distinguished. Further analysis was conducted by comparing the groups consisting only of these children. Means comparison of Torrance test estimations on groups revealed significant distinction between groups in creative potential. We discovered that the most part, 76% of gifted children has speech difficulties, from very small, for example, the difficulties with pronunciation one sound, to the complex. 70% gifted preschoolers have difficulties with producing speech sounds. This table shows the data of our analysis. This difficulties in the development of speech in preschool children with a different creative potential. You see sound structure, difficulties with sound structure, lexical grammatical structure, general underdevelopment of speech, speech delay, stuttering, the data of 3 groups. In the second and In the second and third groups, excuse me please, in each group children with speech difficulties were distinguished. And in the second and third groups revealed an equal number of children with speech difficulties, 18%, a little more than in first group, but the differences are not significant. The specifics of the difficulties depends on the nature of the relations in the development of speech. The children of third group more often suffer from more complicated speech disorders. Average group speech development indexes in first and second groups were very close, whereas they both differed from second group speech development index with significant distinction. This table shows the average by groups of indicators of cognitive activity and intellectual development of preschool children with speech difficulties and various creative potential. Results. Gifted children had a high level of cognitive activity than their peers. However, statistics analysis confirmed significant distinction only to the third group. Average group rate of cognitive activity differed between second and third groups. Execution of the nonverbal relevant test gifted children proved to be more successful. They had average group score higher than peers. Statistics analysis confirmed significant distinction to third group. Preschools from second group also were ahead of third group. The difference of average group scores was significant. Children from second group were most successful in coping with media tasks. The average group score was even higher than in group of more gifted but not statistically significant. Both high and medium level gifted children had significantly better test results than children in third group. Our conclusions. Disclosure of creative potential of preschool children is an important task in the process of training and education, as it promotes initiative and cognitive activity, stimulates interest of creativity, and opens opportunities for active learning of the world and themselves. It's in the children's creativity laid foundation for future achievements and discoveries. Preschool age is one of the most important stages of personality development of the child and disclosure of his talent. The result indicated that the demand of children with speech difficulties among gifted and their peers is nearly equal, but less gifted children more often suffer from more complicated speech disorders. The analysis found significant difference in speech, intellectual development, cognitive activity, and thinking between gifted preschoolers with speech difficulties and their peers suffering from the same disorders but with lower creative abilities. Our study provides initial evidence Our study provides initial evidence for complex diagnostic analysis of future exposure of child individuality. His talents and development difficulties may help to present complete view of child giftedness development. Our result suggests that preventive diagnostics of speech development of gifted preschoolers allows predicting speech forming difficulties and create the opportunities to overcome them for more successful development of the creative potential of children, not only in preschool age, but also in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eugene, and then Sins, and then Sarah.
Creativity tests, the more likely they were to have speech difficulties. Is it possible that these two results are causally connected? I mean that the children of group 3 performed poorer on the creativity tests because they had speech difficulties.
Not only this. Thank you for your questions, because this questions was a question for us too, and we decided it too. And for my opinion, we tried to complete these groups for comparison, for opportunity for comparison. And I think that the creativity of the preschoolers, it's maybe in some weeks or years, and we can see that their results will increase, and in third group too, maybe.
Okay, thank you. Sins?
I'm curious if you would ever plan to do a follow-up study on the gifted children who have speech problems, thinking about the fact that sometimes when children develop, they develop in one area and another area suffers, and that perhaps later on...
Можно чуть погромче? Просто чуть громче. Can you repeat?
The microphone is not on. So
Microphone.
the question is to repeat.
There we go. Okay. So the children in the first group who had the speech problem, but who were very creative, very bright, could it be possible that their speech didn't develop on par with everything else, simply because their developmental attention was going towards the other kind of development, right? And that perhaps in a year or two, or even 6 months, they would have caught up in the speech areas.
Yes, I agree with you. This result will be...
Okay, and Sarah, you have the last question of the conference.
I was intrigued by the cluster of what was identified as the speech difficulties, but also the attention difficulties, or behavioral or emotional. And I was wondering if there's opportunities to do studies where if you intervene and assist with the speech, that if that will positively affect the other challenges with the attention problems or emotional problems, behavioral problems.
Maybe. It's a very complex question. I think it's difficult to, it's not easy to say.
Okay, so maybe we can think about it until the gala dinner, but then you just only think of the food.
Maybe.
So we conclude these 3 days of a conference. I have to thank you all for participating to this event. I have enjoyed it very much, really, even though I was here working, but I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot from you, a lot of ideas. I'm sure that it will take me weeks or months to elaborate all of that material. So remember, 6 o'clock p.m. in front of the Hotel Majestic, Via Indipendenza, 6:15, buses leave. It's your last chance. So for those of you who are coming, I'll see you tonight. And for those of you who are not, thanks again for being here, and thank you very much. Please.
Is there a bus going back the other way? And what
10 or 10:40 in the evening. So there are two chances to come back to the hotel at the end of the event. Either you have dessert and you take the last one, or no dessert and come back early. Okay?